In this video, I'm going to get into how to rotate your core so you can better understand it as you're working on your walking technique, your Tai Chi, or any other activity which involves core rotation. And the fact is that all activities while you're standing on 2 feet involve core rotation. Hi, I'm Dr. Todd Martin, creator of The Walking Code. One of my viewers with Parkinson's disease asked if I would do this video on how to rotate the core so he could understand it better for the purposes of walking. And I think this is a good idea. I've done a lot of talk on core rotation, and I usually talk about it in most of my videos, but I wanted to dedicate this video strictly to helping you understand core rotation and core mechanics a little bit better. Now, there are a lot of muscles in the core, including our waist muscles, our back muscles, and our hip muscles. And I don't think it's necessarily that helpful to have to understand all of the muscles in the core. What is more helpful is to understand what the basic functions are that we need to use and understand as we're walking. So I'm going to divide up the core into 3 specific elements. First is going to be our upper waist muscles. And then second is going to be our lower waist muscles, or the lower abs. And then third is going to be our hip muscles. The muscles in our core help the body move in multiple different planes. We can move forward in the sagittal plane, forward and back. We can rotate in the horizontal plane. And then we can move tilting in the coronal plane. But for the purposes of what we need to understand, I want to focus on the horizontal plane rotation, because that's really what's going on in the body that is not going to be counterbalanced by other movements. Because when we're standing on 2 legs and walking, we're generally going to be keeping ourselves in a vertical, static position in this plane, and the sagittal plane, so I'm not going to be tilting forward, hopefully, when we're walking, or tilting backwards. And we're not going to also be moving so much in the coronal plane, because we don't want to be tilting this way or that way. But we are going to be rotating in the horizontal plane, because we are frequently going to be doing things like walking in a circle, turning around a corner, and even with our straightforward walking, we are actually rotating from one side to the other side all the time. So let's break this down so we can understand it a little bit better. You can go along with me as I do these little exercises to help improve your consciousness of the core movement. The first thing we're going to look at is the upper waist rotation. The upper waist primarily is going to be rotated by our external oblique muscles. And those lie on either side of the rib cage, connecting up here right at the bottom of the ribs and then down onto the pelvis. And they are going to rotate towards the opposite side of your body. So practice this. For your right upper waist muscles, bring your right arm forward and turn your upper body towards the left side. And what we're going to do is try to keep all of the other movements static. So don't let yourself bend over, fall over. Keep your hips still so they're not rotating, so you can focus on the rotation coming from the upper waist. Turn the upper waist to the left, reaching around with your right arm. So that's going to be the right upper waist muscles rotating. Now, turn back using your left upper waist muscles, and then continue going around to the right. So as I am rotating using my upper waist muscles on the left, I'm releasing the rotation from the right. So I'm turning around to the right here, only using the upper waist muscles on the left. And then now I'm going to begin to activate the upper waist muscles on the right and release the upper waist muscles on the left as I turn to square up with the camera, and then as I keep turning in this direction. So now I have engagement of the right upper waist muscles. So practice just feeling that rotation from the upper waist. So these muscles here are rotating the thoracic spine, while we're keeping the rest of this locked down so it doesn't move along with it. So practice that. And then now what I want you to feel is what happens is if you try to rotate from both sides at the same time. I'm going to fully engage on the left, turning around to the right. Now, if I try to engage the right upper waist while continuing to be active on the left upper waist, and I rotate both at the same time, I'm going to topple straight over. Because one of the actions of these upper waist muscles is flexing the spine forward. So if I was going to be doing a sit-up on the ground, I'd be using these external oblique muscles as well as the muscles in the center of the abdomen to pull the spine forward. When we are standing up, that forward motion is also going on, but it's being counterbalanced by our lower ab actions and our hip muscle actions. So the balance ends up keeping us in a stable vertical position. But if we engage both at the same time, that overemphasizes the forward flexion component of our waist activity, and we end up falling forward. Now, we also have upper back and lower back muscles that we use to stabilize our body, but I'm not going to talk about those very much because we are not moving intentionally from our upper back muscles. One of the essential principles of Tai Chi is to hollow the chest and round the back. This gets to the point of how we use our core. When we hollow the chest, it means we are primarily functioning by using this forward rotation from the upper waist muscles in the front. And that's because our balance is in front of our body because our feet are in front of our body. So to keep balanced posture, we need to move around in this sort of fashion, either forward on the left or forward on the right, which hollows our chest. We don't have any feet behind our heels, so that is not a stable balancing area. So you don't want to move around by trying to create rotation by pulling back on the right or pulling back on the left. That's not a functional way to move. So I'm not going to talk a lot about our back muscles, even though of course our back muscles are always active in stabilizing our movements. We're going to focus here on the front. Now that we've talked about our upper waist muscle rotation, external oblique on the right, external oblique on the left. Now we're going to go down to our lower abdominal muscles, and these are going to be primarily the rotational aspect coming from the internal obliques. Now, of course, we have muscles going down the front that are primarily focused on flexion of the abdomen. We're talking here more about rotation, so we're going to focus on the internal obliques. The internal obliques move in the opposite direction from the external obliques. So my internal obliques on the right rotate the spine back and to the right, the opposite of the external obliques, which rotate the spine forward and to the left on this same side. My left internal obliques are going to rotate the spine back and to the left. And the pelvis is going to go with it since the lower abs are connected down here to our pelvis. So let's isolate that motion here. Bring your arms together and just hold them in front and don't let your upper waist move. And then now take your belly button and turn it to the right. Let it go back to the center, turn it back and to the left. And so that's your internal obliques, pulling back into the left, and then I release the left internal obliques as I activate the right internal obliques to get back to the middle, and then keep going until I'm all the way with my belly button pointed at this angle to the right. So this is our internal oblique lower ab rotation. The lower abs are going to be also tucking the pelvis under as they activate. So the lower abs are going to rotate back into the same side, and at the same time they also tuck the pelvis under. So if I were to be standing like this with my pelvis and lower abs disengaged, and then I activate the lower abs on the right, they're going to turn my belly button to the right, and tuck the pelvis on the right, helping to keep it in a neutral position. If you're familiar with anterior or posterior pelvic tilt, the lower abs are essential in creating this proper tilt or neutral position of the pelvis because of that tucking action. They bring the lumbar spine forward as you activate them. If you deactivate your lower abs, your pelvis is going to sink forward like this and causing that anterior pelvic tilt. So we always want to have the lower abs activated. But just like with the upper waist rotation, we want the activity to be on one side at a time. When I have my right lower abs activated, as I do right now, because I'm standing, even though it seems like my spine is situated right between the 2 feet, I am rooted on my right leg because that's where I have my right lower abs activated. I do not have my left lower abs activated at this moment. If you activate both at the same time, you're going to get this splitting action of rotation turning outwards, which is going to destabilize your position, and you're also going to get over tucking of the pelvis. Just like if you activate both upper abs at the same time, it causes you to pitch forward. When you activate both lower abs at the same time, it's going to cause your pelvis to tip backwards, and it's actually going to pull your spine forward. So from the side view, when I have one side of the lower abs activated, I'm standing in a nice posture with a neutral pelvis. If I activate the other side at the same time, the pelvis is going to begin to pitch backwards and I'm going to begin to fall forward because of that. Now, some people do stand with that sort of posture, but what happens is as they are falling forward from the over tucking of the pelvis, they release the forward motion from the upper waist and end up with this slouching posture. So now I have my pelvis pushed forward and posteriorly rotated from over activation of the lower abs, and I have no activation from the upper abs, and you have a slouched position here. So we need to keep balanced rotation from the upper waist and from the lower waist at all times. Now let's look at how we are using the upper waist and lower waist together, because they're always going to be working in cooperation with one another. We can move the upper waist and the lower waist on opposite sides, turning together in the same direction. I call this concordant rotation of the waist. So both my left upper waist and right lower waist are turning to the right, keeping the spine centered over my right leg, and this is creating a nice balanced position. Now, the other type of rotation we have is when we activate the upper and lower waist on the same side of the body. The result of this, some people refer to as cross crawl, where your left leg will go forward with your right arm because the lower abs are turning the pelvis around to the right and the upper waist is turning around to the left. And the leg is connected to the lower abs and pelvis, which turn your left foot forward as your upper waist turns around to the right, and the arms are connected to the upper waist, so that makes your right arm go forward with the left leg. So that is cross crawl, and it's because the upper waist and lower waist are being activated on the same side. So practice that. Turn your lower abs or your belly button to the left as you turn your upper abs or your arm to the right. And see if you can feel the tension created by that torquing action. And then practice it on the other side. Turn your upper waist with your arm to the left as you turn your lower waist or your belly button to the right. And feel if you can feel that twisting action there. That sort of twisting action, that torsional rotation, as I call it, is really critical because it's what we're using when we're walking in a straight line. When we are walking in a straight line, our lower abs are turning towards the side of the standing leg as the upper abs are turning towards the side of the swing leg, creating that torsional rotation. Belly button to the left, upper waist and arm to the right. The result is a straightforward movement because the rotations are canceling each other out. If you can find this sort of balanced position, left arm going forward, right leg going forward, and feel the twist in the waist as you do that. So practice this feeling. Turn the belly button to the left, that's the lower abs, upper waist and arm to the right, and create that twisting feeling as you lift your right leg up. And feel that torsional rotation going on. That's what's happening when we walk forward with proper posture. If we move forward from both sides, we end up leaning like that. So you don't want to do that. Keep the torsional rotation here. And then we place the heel by turning the upper waist back towards the standing leg. So concordant rotation going towards the standing leg. That is what puts our heel down. Then we turn the lower waist back to the right towards the side of the forward standing leg. Now I have the torsional twist again. And then we pull forward from the hip, and now we have the torsional rotation on the other side. And then we bring the heel down by rotating the upper waist. Then we shift the weight by turning the lower waist back towards this side, and we're again in this position. From the side view, the upper waist on the left, lower waist on the left, and then we power from the hips, which I'll get into in a minute. And then we have the upper waist on the right, lower waist on the right, and then we power from the hips. And that brings us to our hip action. The hip muscles are also part of our core, and they also function through rotation, even though it's not quite as evident. So our hips can flex, pulling the leg up, or they can extend, pushing the leg behind. Those are the two elements of our hip action that are going to power our movement. Now we also have external rotation of the hip and internal rotation of the hip, and we have abduction of the hip and adduction of the hip. But those are reflexive or responsive parts of the hip action. What you need to do to control your movements is focus on extension or flexion. And how you use that is going to determine whether you're walking correctly or not. Let's talk about the rotational aspect of hip flexion and hip extension. If I flex my right hip, it causes a pulling action towards the right. So like the lower abs, flexion of one hip causes the body to turn towards that hip as I flex it. If I extend the hip, it causes the body to push away to the other side. And so it almost works like the external oblique turning away from the active hip. So hip flexion and hip extension. Now we also have, of course, hip flexion and hip extension when the leg is off the ground, which is going to look very different. Hip flexion and hip extension when the leg is off the ground is much easier to appreciate than when it's on the ground, because I can move like this where I'm flexing my right hip to power that motion, or I can extend the right hip to power that motion. The effect is very different, but it seems like I'm just moving to the other side with both movements. So it's hard to see or appreciate the difference. It's even harder to appreciate that difference when we're walking forward in a straight line. When we're walking on level ground, we're going to be flexing the hip, which pulls the body in the direction of the flexing hip. So as I'm walking, and I get to this position here, when my forefoot hits the flat position, I'm going to flex my left hip, pulling the body forward into this position. Some people think this is hip extension because the leg is going slightly behind the body, but it's really not going very far behind the body. From this position, I'm going to flex the hip, and that takes me to here. So we have a lot of pelvic rotation from the lower abs, and then we also have rotation because the left hip is pulling, which is going to pull the body around to the left. That is creating the motion of the swing leg. that is moving forward like this. There's not actually a lot of hip extension going here on the left side. So it's not that my hip is extended behind the body as I do the swing through. This is more rotation that's creating the swing of the leg. Then I use my waist rotation to bring the heel down, and then that is where you're really going to get the extension, but it's being caused by the forward motion of the upper waist bringing the body forward and down. It's not extension of the hip that is creating that motion. This is waist rotation that's bringing the heel down and beginning to bring the body forward. As I demonstrated before, after the heel hits, then we're using the lower abs to tuck, and that's pulling the body forward. You see, the rear leg is just peeling off the ground as I tuck under because I'm not pushing myself forward. The rear leg is passive. Once I hit the ground here with the heel, I'm pulling forward from the forward leg core, upper and lower waist muscles and the hip muscles. So the final thing I'm going to talk about is engagement of the core and how we do that. One of my viewers asked recently what the difference is between engaging the lower abs and tucking the pelvis. And that's a good question. A lot of people talk about engaging your core, but they're not very specific about what that means. Most people take from that they should tighten their waist muscles to be engaging their core. But tightening your core, tightening your waist muscles does not contribute to movement. It's just like tightening your bicep muscle does not contribute to flexing the arm. Flexing the arm contributes to flexing the arm. So I'm using my bicep to flex the arm, but that's different than tightening my bicep. Tightening the bicep, which we would use if we're trying to make a big muscle, is really contracting the bicep muscle against the opposing tricep muscle. It doesn't create movement. And the same thing for our waist muscles. What I want you to focus on is the movement itself. So not feeling a tightening of the waist muscles, but doing the motion. Turning your upper waist to the left or turning your upper waist to the right. Using your lower abs to rotate and root the right leg, and at the same time tucking the pelvis on the right. That's the action of the lower abs. Again, if I disengage the lower abs on the right, now I'm going to engage the lower abs by tucking the pelvis on the right. So that is the action. I'm not contracting the lower abs to try to feel the energy of the muscle. I am simply doing the motion. I am tucking the pelvis by engaging the lower abs. I'm not just squeezing the lower abs, which is just tightening the lower abs against their opposite muscles over here. That doesn't do anything. I just need to move the lower abs into the position that I'm trying to create. So I think that is a good summary of our core rotation, and you can use that as you watch my other videos to understand a little bit better what's going on. If you enjoy this video and my other content, make sure you click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video so it gets out to more people. Drop me a comment and let me know what you think of this video and the other ones. What other information can I provide for you to help you walk more fluidly, with more confidence, and with lower impact on your joints? Doing all that will help drive the YouTube algorithm to get this content out to more people, which I think is really important because, honestly speaking, the content I'm providing here on this channel is available nowhere else. And not a lot of channels can say that. If you've been watching my channel for a while, I think you will recognize that that is the truth.